Hey guys, Desolator Magic here, back with another MTG Legends video. If you haven't seen the rest of this series, definitely check out the playlist. So I'm finally doing it. I'm making a video on Summer Magic, one of the most notorious misprints in the history of the game, resulting in one of the most expensive sets ever created. Well, maybe set isn't the right term to use, but let's jump into the early history of Magic so that you have some context about when this happened. Alpha, of course, came out in 1993, and Revised came out in 1994. So all of this whole situation was in the very early days of Magic. So this is back when, they were still trying to figure out card design, vendors, and like who to hire to print the cards, hiring artists, the whole thing. Also, keep in mind, they did not know how big or important the card game was going to be and how they should probably manage it properly and be extremely careful. Arguably, they still don't know that. In fact, when Revised was first being printed, they had some serious quality control issues, and unlike today, they actually cared about fixing it. They didn't just release it. The colors were extremely washed out, the incorrect artwork was used for Serendipity. That's fun. And on top of all that, they were starting to get a lot of backlash for their offensive and insensitive use of satanic and cult imagery. I guess they thought being super edgy sold, but no. So basically, it was a disaster. They did decide to try to fix the problems in the summer of 1994 with a revised, codenamed Edgar. This is the legendary Summer Magic that everybody talks about. So these Summer Magic boxes are actually incredibly difficult to identify without opening at least one booster because they were simply printed inside of normal Revised Edition booster packs. Because remember, this was supposed to be a fixed Revised with all the errors corrected. So in theory, they wanted it to look the same so that people would just say, oh, it's still Revised. Okay, cool. Now, I should point out, it was never formally called Summer Magic because, like I said, they're trying to pass it off as just another restock of Revised. So that's just the nickname that people gave it. The product was never actually titled that. I guess calling it like Revised V2 or like Second Edition or something, I don't know, or Revised Oops Edition didn't really fly with the people planning it. So I guess they thought, let's just quietly fix this and release some more. And they did not. So the actual print job itself called Summer Magic was never very widespread because even though it was supposed to fix the problems with Revised, it contained about the same number or more of errors. The colors, across the board, were incredibly dark. It was extremely noticeable on certain cards. Serendipity did have its artwork fixed, but the artist's credit was now incorrect on the bottom of the card. The artist name for Plateau was still incorrect. Hurricane was somehow printed incorrectly with a blue border, indicating that it was a blue identity card, even though it was not. So because this was supposed to fix Revised, Wizards recalled the entire product for destruction. See, this is why you, proofread and check your work, especially when you already screwed up and now you're scrambling to fix it. Haste makes waste, after all. Hey, here's a fun tip for all you distributors and store owners everywhere. If a company recalls literally anything collectible, make sure that some of it, already got sold or went missing. And then definitely don't send them all back. In fact, if you can, don't send any of them back. So anyway, Wizards recalled and destroyed all of the product, allegedly, according to them, but, this is provably false. Maybe they thought it was true when they made that statement, but this recall did cause a big shortage of Revised, actually, around that same time, which is funny because even now it was so reprint heavy and the cards were so relatively weak that Revised cards still aren't really worth much. The whole block isn't really worth that much except for the lands and a couple others. Also, the sheer print volume of Revised was pretty high. So fortunately, the best estimate that anybody has right now is that exactly 4 cases of this Summer Magic were not destroyed. That's 40 total booster boxes. And remember, they didn't contain 36 boosters back then. So this is not a lot. These incorrect products were shipped to locations in Texas, Tennessee, and Ireland. So how do you identify these cards if by design they look identical to Revised? Well, there's actually quite a few ways, which is really nice. First of all, like I mentioned, all the Hurricane cards will be on a blue frame, so that's a dead giveaway. But sparing actual discrepancies like the wrong artist being, on the card, like I mentioned. I think that only identifies 3 cards anyway. Across the board, every single card had a copyright date of 1994 on the bottom, which the rest of Revised did not. They just simply didn't put a copyright on it. Now, contrary to popular belief, this isn't the only set to have copyright 1994 on the bottom. For example, Maze of Ith from The Dark, 1994, there you go. Now, there is a very popular Magic set identification chart floating around on the internet that claims that the only cards to ever have 94 printed on them are Summer Magic, but it's just blatantly incorrect. So the way I would put it is, if the card looks like it's from Revised and you think it's from Revised and it doesn't have a set symbol, but it says 1994, then it's Summer Magic. But it's easier to tell just by the ink. So since this is such a rare product, what kind of money are we looking at here? Well, it's really hard to say because it's one of those products where it's so rare that they're worth whatever somebody happens to be willing to pay when it goes to auction. I've personally seen cards swing from like 2,000 to 5,000 just because, but you only reach those types of prices typically with like the most popular noteworthy cards like the Blue Hurricane and certain rares, certain cards that are very famous for being played in a lot of decks. On eBay, a lot of graded like 8 and up Summer Magic tends to go for about 100 to 150. So theoretically, that's the lowest you could get. Also, I found a mountain of people trying to pass off cards of Summer Magic that clearly are not. I don't know if they're confused about similarly titled releases or if they're just lying, but watch out for that. So the most expensive card is obviously the Blue Hurricane because it was such a comically bad mess up. The dual color lands would be a close second, I would assume, but like I said, it's hard to find any kind of sales records of these. I mean, right now, there's a Blue Hurricane for sale on one website for $12,000. I'm looking at an island selling for over $175 and the auction isn't even closed yet. And I couldn't find a sales record anywhere of the dual lands, but theoretically they're worth several thousand. Oh, and I do believe that I mentioned another card that's notoriously expensive. And I just happen to know somebody who has one. So these right here are the regular revised Birds of Paradise. And remember, Summer Magic was revised. So this right here is the Summer Magic version of Birds of Paradise right here. Retails for over $5,000. Now, side by side, you should be able to see pretty easily that is so much darker. I mean, you would have no trouble spotting one of these. So if you ever see something like this, yeah, tell the person what they got. So that's the history of Summer Magic for you. It is definitely one of the most legendary pseudo sets in the history of Magic. And if you want to get filled in on all of the most legendary things that have ever happened in the Magic world, definitely check out the playlist on my channel, titled, of course, MTG Legends, and subscribe if you don't want to miss more in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.